Well, that didn't last very long, did it? Just days ago, Democrats were strutting across Washington like they ran the place, pounding their chests, demanding $1.5 trillion in new spending, threatening to keep the government shut down until President Trump caved. Well, they called it fighting for the people. They said Republicans were holding America hostage, but now it's the Democrats who are begging. Their so-called power play just collapsed overnight. This is a total political meltdown, folks. They went from $1.5 trillion in demands to $20 billion crumbs. This is a 99% retreat in less than a week. And here's the kicker, folks. Even their own party is turning on them because behind closed doors, Senate Democrats are whispering about fear of the far left, fear of backlash, fear of losing everything in 2026. Meanwhile, President Donald J. Trump is standing firm, calm, unshaken. Mike Johnson's refusing this smoke-filled backroom deal. The GOP didn't blink, and the entire Democratic strategy just went up in flames. But here's the part that the media will not tell you. This wasn't just a legislative flop. This was a psychological collapse. In fact, the left thought that they could hold the country hostage, play politics with your paycheck, and walk away looking like heroes. But instead, they humiliated themselves in front of the entire nation. Federal workers are hurting, small businesses are bleeding billions of dollars, and the party that claimed to be fighting for the little guy, they just threw the little guy under the bus for political theater. Now, tonight, I want to break down how the Democrats' $1.5 trillion shutdown stunt imploded overnight, why their bluff got called out by President Trump and Speaker Mike Johnson, and what this means heading into 2026 midterms. Grab your popcorn, guys. Grab your popcorn, patriots. This is going to be brutal. Hit the like button and subscribe. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's rewind to where this whole circus started, okay? Let's not forget, Democrats walked into these negotiations demanding $1.5 trillion in new spending, okay? This is money that the country doesn't have, right? I mean, drop a debt if you think that we're in enough debt right now, right? This is money that taxpayers never approved. They held the continuing resolution hostage like it was some kind of a political trophy, threatening to keep the government closed until, or at least unless they got their wish list fully restored to Biden era levels, right? They dressed it up as protecting healthcare and funding the people, saving democracy, right? All these things, right? But it wasn't really about protecting their reckless spending machine. That's what it was really about, guys. They wanted to wipe away President Trump's administration's reforms, common sense work requirements, anti-fraud measures, limits on runaway programs. Democrats call that cruelty, but most Americans call it accountability, right? It wasn't about compassion. This was clearly about control. And when they realized that President Trump and Speaker Mike Johnson weren't buying their bluff, panic set in. The big bad $1.5 trillion demand that was supposed to break the GOP, it was about to break the Democrats themselves. Then, boom, it collapsed. Within days, that mighty $1.5 trillion demand shrank to peanuts, to about $20 billion. They went from give us everything to please give us something, a 99% retreat in less than a week. That's not a negotiation. That is a surrender with sprinkles on top. Senator Chris Murphy floated the idea pretending that it was a compromise, but everybody saw the truth. Democrats had zero leverage. There was no leverage left for the Democrats. They couldn't even keep their own caucus unified. I mean, look, 3 Senate Democrats had already broken ranks. The shutdown that they launched to flex their muscles turned into a public embarrassment. This wasn't strategy. This was survival. They needed a headline, any kind of headline. Democrats secured $20 billion deal. They hoped that Americans wouldn't notice that they had lost about 99% of their ask. But you noticed, I noticed, right? Drop an I noticed down below if you saw, right? The whole country noticed it. It proved what we've said all along, guys. Their fight for the people was never about people. It was about pride, and that pride just went down in flames. And so when the government shutdown began, Democrats expected chaos to break loose, thinking that the public would instantly blame Republicans, but it didn't play out that way at all. In fact, the shutdown started because Democrats refused to pass a clean continuing resolution all over that $1.5 trillion tantrum. They framed it as moral welfare, Republicans taking food from the poor. Trump is attacking healthcare. Yeah. The same tired talking points that they recycled since 2016, right? But behind the sound bites were real Americans like you who were paying the price. Federal workers sent home, veterans waiting for checks, travel delays stacking up as TSA and the FAA operations were strained. This was a self-inflicted wound, and everybody knew it. President Trump, he called their bluff, standing firm at the White House, reminding America that leadership means discipline, not emotional blackmail. The Democrats thought that a shutdown was going to scare the GOP into submission, but instead it exposed how reckless and how out of touch they became. And that is when Speaker Mike Johnson made his move. Steady, measured, and absolutely unshakable. Speaker Mike Johnson became the immovable object in the entire standoff. So while Chuck Schumer and the Democrat elite hunted for a backroom deal, Johnson refused. No smoke-filled rooms, no hidden deals, no four leaders writing trillion-dollar bills behind closed doors, none of that. He said it straight. We're going back to regular order. This is a member-driven Congress, not a dictatorship of party bosses. And they're trying to say that Trump is claiming to be king. Okay, guys, the Democrats are the ones that are acting like this is some kind of a dictatorship. And so when that sent Democrats into a total panic mode, okay? They couldn't even control him. They couldn't bribe him with media pressure or scare tactics. Mike Johnson's clean CR proposal, it was a straightforward funding bill without bloated extras. He put the spotlight right back on the Democrat obstruction. This was a masterclass in strategic patience. It really was. I mean, Johnson, he knew that the shutdown wasn't a GOP failure. It was a Democratic implosion. So as President Trump fired back from the Oval Office, the entire Republican base rallied. The message was clear. No ransom for chaos, no bailouts for bad behavior. And that moment marked the turning point where the Democrats' narrative became a crumble in real time. Now, behind the polished press conferences and talking points, panic was spreading behind the Democrat ranks. Multiple insiders began leaking that top Democrats were afraid of the far left. They weren't negotiating from strength. They were negotiating from fear. Fear of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calling them sellouts. Fear of left-wing activists launching primaries against anyone who dared compromise. But this is why they dragged this shutdown long past reason. Chuck Schumer and company didn't want to face the wrath of their own base, but that cowardice came at a price. It came at a very hefty price, in fact. You had moderate Democrats starting to whisper about the disaster that was unfolding on their watch. We've lost the middle is what they said. This is what one strategist reportedly said anyway. They tried to posture as principled fighters, but behind closed doors, it was panic, polls, and PR damage control. This wasn't leadership. This was a submission to the loudest fringe voices in the room. And this is exactly why their strategy collapsed. You cannot govern when you're ruled by fear of your own radicals. So in every generation, there's a shift. And right now, that shift is very clear. Seniors are reviewing their Medicare plans with Chapter. And this is why I partner with Chapter, because when the herd moves, it moves for a reason. Now, one of our viewers told us, everyone I know was calling Chapter about Medicare. So I finally did, and I'm glad I wasn't last. So let me ask, are you going to stay behind? Or are you going to join the herd that's already moving? Now, most people, they're already calling the phone number right there at the bottom of your screen, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. I left a link for you guys down below. And that phone number again is 909-563-8279. Oh, and take it from real people who've already done it. Jan said, Chapter is the best for Social Security. I will not use anyone else. And Lewis Lyon said, thank you, Ron. Chapter found me a better plan, and thank you, Chapter. So while Democrats played political chicken, real Americans paid the price. Small business owners who rely on federal permits and contracts saw their income vanish overnight. Construction projects froze, SBA loan approvals were halted, federal workers missed paychecks, and contractors were forced to shut down. Now, Fox News reported billions in economic losses just weeks into the standoff. One trucking company in Virginia said that their entire holiday shipment schedule collapsed. Another restaurant owner near DC said federal employees, his regulars, just stopped coming. The ripple effect has been devastating. Democrats claim to fight for the working class, yet their reckless stunt hurt the working class the most. Now, they pretty much used everyday people as leverage in a high-stakes political gamble, and they admitted it, and those same people are now footing the bill. So meanwhile, the White House was silent. President Trump kept the moral high ground, calling for a clean CR, protecting taxpayers, and demanding accountability. Now, the contrast couldn't be clearer. Leadership versus political theater, and the damage Democrats caused, absolutely unforgivable. And so at the start of the shutdown, Democrats strutted around Washington like victors in waiting. They thumped their chests, paraded in front of cameras, and they swore that they were never going to back down. The language was fiery, it was ferocious. Republicans are heartless. Trump is destroying the poor. We'll fight for every penny. But the moment that their strategy backfired, everything changed. Overnight, the tone flipped from defiance to damage control. All of a sudden, the same voices were whispering about compromise and reasonable solutions. The bold rhetoric vanished. It was a political whiplash. Their messaging team scrambled to spin a humiliating defeat into a win, but they failed. Headlines shifted from Democrats stand firm to Democrats seek off-ramp. It's comical, guys. Even the mainstream media couldn't keep up with the narrative collapse. It was kind of like watching a castle crumble in real time, built on arrogance, toppled by reality. What began as a declaration of power, it ended as a plea for mercy. And that, my friends, that is when the American people saw the truth. It wasn't courage that drove Democrats, it was desperation. Now, here's the part that really turned stomachs, okay? Democrats claimed the shutdown was for the people. But when the dust settled, it became very obvious. They used the people as pawns. They weaponized fear, telling seniors that their checks were at risk, warning families about food stamp cuts, and blaming Republicans for every consequence of their own action, or I should say of their own inaction. They hurt the very groups that they pretended to champion: low-income workers, single parents, veterans, using them as props in a political theater of suffering. This is emotional manipulation at a national scale, and it's a shame that they're doing this. And so when things went south, they didn't even apologize. They doubled down. They made it worse. So this isn't governments. This was never governance. In fact, this was a blackmail coded in empathy. Democrats gambled that chaos would turn Americans against Trump and Mike Johnson, but instead, Americans turned on them. The moral rot was exposed, and you just cannot claim to fight for the poor at the same time while you're intentionally making them collateral damage. You know what I'm saying? Like, they thought that they were scripting a political victory, but instead they ended up writing the story of their own collapse. And then came the polls, folks. They were brutal. I mean, within days of the shutdown dragging on, national surveys started flashing red lights across every Democrat war room. Approval ratings for the party cratered, especially among independents. Swing state voters in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Arizona, they said exactly what everybody else was already thinking. Why are the Democrats doing this to us? Even mainstream networks couldn't hide it. CNN's own panel called it a strategic disaster. Polls showed over 60% of Americans blamed Democrats for prolonging the shutdown. And for the first time, it wasn't Trump taking the hit. It was the left. The panic spread fast. Oh, it was bad. Strategists whispered about containment. House Democrats began distancing themselves from leadership, trying to salvage their own re-election bids. And of course, the message was clear. Heading into 2026 midterms, Americans are tired of chaos. They're tired of hypocrisy. They're tired of politicians using crises as campaign tactics. This shutdown wasn't just a mistake. It was a political earthquake. Now, through it all, Speaker Mike Johnson and President Trump sent one unmistakable signal: no ransom for political blackmail. The Democrats wanted a payout. They wanted the GOP to flinch. But this time, the Republicans held the line. Johnson refused to negotiate behind closed doors, and Trump refused to budge an inch. That discipline right there changed everything. Because for the first time in years, the GOP wasn't reacting. It was leading. Instead of giving in to the emotional theatrics of Washington, Republicans showed America what restraint really looks like. They proved that compromise isn't weakness, but it's giving in to extortion. That's what weakness is. Democrats learned the hard way. The new GOP doesn't play by old rules. No backroom smoke, no secret deals, no fake unity photo ops, just results. And when the smoke cleared, it wasn't the Republicans scrambling for damage control. It was the Democrats kneeling before the cameras, begging for a $20 billion consolation prize. That's not negotiation, that's defeat. And by the end of the third week, it was clear this wasn't just a policy failure. This was a meltdown. The mighty $1.5 trillion showdown that was supposed to move Democrat dominance ended as a desperate scramble for survival. Their speeches evaporated. Their talking points contradicted each other. Their leaders looked exhausted and tired and scattered and just completely out of touch. The same people who were shouting, "Republicans are destroying America," They're now whispering, can we just end this thing? Reporters caught aides saying, we just need a win, any win. That's not leadership. That is surrender, okay? This wasn't the confident, chest-puffing Democrat Party of week one. This was a party that had overplayed its hand and lost everything. Their moral authority, gone. Their leverage, gone. Their credibility, torched. What started as a $1 trillion power play collapsed into a plea for $20 billion, a rounding error in Washington terms. It was the political equivalent of declaring victory while retreating from the battlefield. They didn't win, they survived. Now, think about just a month ago, okay? The Democrats strutted. They strutted around cable news studios like conquering heroes. Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, Bernie Sanders, all declaring that the GOP was on the ropes. They mocked Speaker Mike Johnson, sneered at Trump's fiscal discipline, and vowed to restore Biden-era funding. Now, if we fast forward to now, the difference is staggering. The swagger's gone. The talking points have turned into excuses. The headlines that once praised their defiance are now mocking their retreat. The same networks that amplify their outrage now question their judgment. Now, this is what happens when arrogance meets reality. The Democrats believed their own hype, right up until the polls, the public, and the economy turned against them. They thought that Trump and Mike Johnson were going to blink, but they didn't. They thought the GOP would cave. They didn't. And now, as the dust settles, one truth stands tall. The $1.5 trillion shutdown stunt didn't last very long, but its consequences will, because America just watched a ruling party collapse under the weight of its own ego. Now, folks, I want you to remember this moment, okay? The Democrats tried to bluff their way through a shutdown, and it backfired spectacularly. They hurt the very people that they claim to protect. They hurt the very people that they claim to protect. They lost their leverage, and they handed Trump one of the biggest political wins of his presidency. So what do you think? Should Republicans stand even firmer next time? Should there be consequences for hostage politics? Drop your thoughts down below, guys. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because this story isn't over and neither is America's comeback. This is Ron Yates. I'll see you guys on the next one.